Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us for our free webinar session today, presented by mscrm-addons.com. Today's topic is about how to cut storage costs in Dynamics 365 with their add-on attachment extractor. We estimate that today's webinar will take up about 30 minutes of your time, including some time at the end for a Q&A. Our webinar is being recorded and will be available on demand after the live session. All attendees will receive a follow-up email after the webinar is complete with a link to access the presentation. In the chat, you can find links to our social media, website, as well as a link to our Calendly, where you can schedule a 30-minute meeting with one of our experts at Sabre to discuss any questions you might have. With that being said, I'd like everybody to submit questions through the question panel or chat during the session, or wait until the end for the Q&A. Please remember to stay muted during the session unless otherwise prompted. Now, I'd like to introduce you to Bailey Moss, Director of Sales at mscrm-addons.com.
All right, thank you, Caitlin, and thank you to Sabre Limited for having us. So as mentioned, and I'll go ahead and share my screen here. So this will be a generally kind of half slideshow, half actually showing how the product looks. But today we'll be talking about Attachment Extractor, and I'll really break it down into the why, how, and how much of how it works. But first, a little bit about me. So Caitlin already mentioned I'm the Director of Sales for the Americas here at mscrm Add-ons. I have been with mscrm Add-ons for going on 8 years, which now it doesn't feel like it's been 8 years, but it has. And my background is in, support as well as professional services. So if you have any questions during or after the session, you can always reach out to myself. We have a great partner team here as well, support, a little bit of everything. But before we get started into the actual product, a little bit about our company. So we were founded actually in Graz, Austria. So we're a European-based company, and I myself am based out of our Atlanta office, as well as a support partner team out of our US Atlanta office here. And so we have 2 offices. We also have a few people all over the world. But the nice part about having these 2 core offices, and all of our resources are internal, from support to sales to executive team, is a nice support window of 17 hours a day, Monday through Friday. We also have emergency support, but really just a nice thing to have. Like I can ping our dev team if I have a kind of more in-depth question or a specific customization question, and generally I get an answer within minutes, depending on the time of day in Austria. But it's great for me, and not always great for them to have a salesperson always pinging them when they have a question. But a little bit more about us. So we've been in business since, well, I'll state it in kind of CRM terms. So we actually started in 1995 as a development company, and then moved only into mainly into CRM in 2005. So we've actually been around since CRM 1.2, and have been building solutions since 1.2 all the way up to the latest. And now, more so than just how our name is MSCRM, it's no longer even called Microsoft CRM, but we're keeping it because of our large customer base. But we're more of a power platform company now. And what we do really is build solutions, fill gaps in functionality for Microsoft Dynamics, increase usability, save on cost, and really overall efficiency. So a little bit more about us. We have well over 5,000 companies using our software. We are ISO certified, and we work with partners like Sabre heavily. Like our whole goal is to work with partners. We really find symbiotic relationships, and we ourselves are a Microsoft partner. That used to say Microsoft Gold partner, but Caitlin, as I'm sure you know, they switched it to just Microsoft partner, Microsoft Solutions partner. There's no longer like the gold, platinum, silver designation for partners. And I know I already kind of skipped ahead to this next slide, which is so our sole focus now is the Power Platform. Really, Attachment Extractor is a Dataverse solution, so not just Dynamics 365 sales, not customer service, field service. It's all Dataverse-based environments you can use it. It is a certified software on Microsoft App Source, and we are a pure Microsoft company. So we only work in the Microsoft space. In fact, we will be having some very cool announcements. We usually do have some cool announcement, but towards the end of this year, there will be a lot of new information and features coming out. But yeah, and this is of course just kind of all these slides are with a name like mscrm-addons, which I always ask, can we change this when I first started, but now we're known for it. This is our feel good, just about us in terms of users and companies. And it shows our 2. So I'm just going to talk about Attachment Extractor today, but our other flagship product is also called Documents Core Pack, but I'm just going to stay away from that today. But now attachment extractors. So I always start with the why, and the why usually starts before you even see this chart. It usually starts with an email from Microsoft that says, "Hey, you're over on your storage. Either buy additional add-ons for your storage at $40 per gig per month, or your service, there's going to be like speed or degradation, or worst case, it won't be accessible." So those kind of semi-threatening emails that you get from Microsoft if you're over. Unfortunately, if you're using CRM, if you're using Dynamics, your Dataverse environment to its fullest and tracking emails and tracking files and notes, then you're gonna receive that email eventually. So especially with what we see, almost every environment I've taken a look at had exponential growth or near exponential growth of both database and file storage. So this is really a common chart. This is actually an environment I built and built a flow just to show the example. And so there's not really that much data we work with, although we do work with companies only 10 gigabytes over all the way up to terabytes over of storage. But this does give you an idea of what we extract here as well. So this is really the why. Now into the how. So what we move is, and I'll kind of go back. So in this chart, you'll see on the database side, we move from the activity pointer based table. So that's generally what we found to be the largest table in most people's or most companies' database storage. And then on the file usage, we extract from the annotation base and the attachment tables. So those are your primary file storage tables within the storage capacity. And we do that in two different ways. So you actually includes two services, and everything I mentioned is included. There's no charge, no additional charge for hosting if you self-host or host through us. But essentially, you have one service that moves from the database, and what that does is it extracts rich email content from emails themselves, because that's the number one cause of high storage in the activity pointer base, and it moves it to Azure Blob Storage. So, and our kind of claim to fame, what makes this such an easy solution to really prove and get a return on investment on, is that there's no change in the UI. So even though we're extracting the rich email body, it still looks exactly the same in Dynamics, still looks exactly the same in Outlook. There's no change from a user perspective, but we are taking that and just moving it to a blob container for you. And it's not our blob, it's your blob container, because we in no way want to be, data custodians. It just passes through the service, gets moved, and it's fully accessible, looks exactly the same as before it was extracted. On the file side, you actually have two options. One, to extract to SharePoint. So one common question for me is, are you currently using SharePoint, or are you wanting to access files that you're extracting external of Dynamics? If the answer is yes, then I say, you know what, you should use SharePoint. And what we can do is we can follow the standard document management setup, like an entity or table-based file storage, or you can say point at this specific SharePoint site and extract that way. Additionally, on the file side, which is kind of my favorite because it's flat storage, you can also move to blob storage. But yeah, and of course, like the key benefits are really what I've already talked about. It's reduction, and our average is above 200% on the return on investment. So a very quick return on investment. One nice feature is also we can do an average calculation of how much money you would save based on your current storage. And then really the second being apart from ROI is really just no impact to users, because one thing, end users don't like, it's change. It doesn't matter if it's a great change, like having a co-pilot help you write your emails, which I really like, because I tend to bounce my emails, especially those that are more direct or say marketing. I like to bounce those off of people, so to have a co-pilot to help me. But there's also a lot of people, just uncomfortable with change, and that's where we don't affect it at all. And that does lead me into another item, which is one question that gets asked often is, do we have, because we're moving data, do we have any impact on future Copilot functionality? And the good news is we've already done a study, and we have KV articles that support this as well, but we've seen no negative impact on Copilot functionality within Dataverse. And that's primarily because when we move the rich email body, we're actually retaining the plain text of the email, so the actual data of the email is still available for Copilot to pick up. But next gets into the how much, which is how much can we expect to reduce. So on the activity pointer based side, it's going to be close to around 40%. So 40% reduction. The reason it is, and that's really from an average of our customer services. That's not from a lab setting. In a lab, we could get closer to like 60% if it were a clean environment. But really, this is from a customer service average, or not customer service, but from customer services average. And the reason it's 40% is because there's only so much data you can strip out of an email body. I mean, you're already dealing in the kilobyte range, but our goal there is just to move as much as we can from those, all those images, those signature formatting, everything that there really builds up. And if you're tracking emails, I mean, gosh, in my inbox, I was just looking today, and I have 100,000, there's 100,000 items in there that have been picked up, and I'd say at least 80% of those have been tracked to my environment. And I'm just one person within our company, not even necessarily a heavy emailer overall and compared to others. On the attachment side or the file usage side, we get closer to 80%. So our average is 80% there for the annotations and the attachments, and that's because you're moving files. They're larger. You're stripping out the whole file. It's it's a lot more to move in terms of what you can take out. The activity pointer base, you still have the record there, which is a big portion of the storage. To give you kind of our number one, we have a case study coming out either this at the end of this month. I guess we're already at nearly the end of the month, or in at the beginning of next month is another case study. So with a U.S. North American based company. But this is kind of our number one customer in terms of savings. It's actually closer to $500,000 a year was their return on investment. And it's constantly going up because it's not just about how much data it moves initially. So it's not just about historical data. It's also about what data you're creating. So it's not just really, it's old and new data that you're extracting. So that return on investment is always growing when you use it. So initially, you'll want it to focus on historical data, and then it eventually gets caught up, and then it's extracting new items. And then you can see, it's moving over 6 terabytes. But we have hundreds of customers of Attachment Extractor. This is actually our fastest growing solution, primarily because everyone's in kind of a late stage of having a dataverse environment, and that storage builds up very quickly. The only other thing I haven't mentioned yet, and I'll mention this before I get into the actual showing the product, which can be a bit fun because there's really no change in the UI, so we do have some stuff to show there. But is that it's a set up and forget service. So by that I mean you set up the extraction and then you truly forget about it. Once you set your filter criteria and what you want it to extract, it should just always run in the background. And I'll get a little bit more into the configuration as well. But here I'll go ahead and go over to my demo environment, and I'll just go home. So I'll be working out of the Sales Hub. However, it's going to be the same functionality, no matter what model-driven app you're using. If you're extracting, if you have a Dataverse environment and you're using, say, a Power Page, but you still want to access files in a Power Page, there should be no issue there because of the way it's retrieving it. However, of course, if you're using like a custom portal, I always recommend reaching out to us because it does make it a bit easier, or I guess a bit clearer, because you don't want to, extract all your items and then not have access. But the good news is, even if with Attachment Extractor, even if your service were to stop, you'd still have access to the items because they're still sitting in your own blob container. But as an example, I'll be working at a Sales Hub. So I'm just going to go to an account that I know has items that are both extracted and not extracted. So I'll go to Aero Transportation here. And this is kind of my alter ego, which is actually my first name, Steven, but unknown to me why. I've always gone by Bailey. But you can see here, for the demo purposes, in our service, you can enable this, but we add markup to the file name and email body, and that's a virtual markup. So you can see I have the EXTR here, but first, I'll open that something that hasn't been extracted. So this email right here, the reason it hasn't been extracted is because you can see it's active, it's in draft status. So we don't touch anything that's, for good reason, we're not moving things that are in draft. So you can see here, if I open this attachment, it acts normal. I have a preview. This was actually generated with our tool documents core pack, but if I want to download it, it'll download. It acts totally normal. That's how it should act because, of course, this hasn't been moved. There's no impact. If I open this record, I can see it here. I've got my rich email body. Everything is the same. The nice part is there really is no change. In fact, that's why we add the markup, is so that I can actually see that there is a change. So if I open this with the XTR, it's going to preview the same. I can download it the same. If I open up the email itself here, you'll see it's exactly the same. The only difference is the virtual markup of this content's already been, is extracted to Azure Blob. The other part is not just access from a UI perspective, it's also behavior. So if I were to forward this email, you'll see here, it's bringing back in the attachment, bringing in the email body. In the background, what's happening is a plugin is firing, it's replacing the on retrieve and pulling it back near real time compared to what it would be in the background of a standard unextracted item. So from a full behavior to UI perspective, there's really no change for end users. The nice part here is in this service, if I go back to this account here, so I have my service set up with, or I have two services set up for this environment. One moving the file side, one moving database as mentioned, and my file side is moving to SharePoint, and we're using document management. So if I go over here to my documents here, the related documents, and I go to quote, because you can also set subfolders, of course, but this is related to a quote. So, well, if this would load here, you can see this is that email with the quote attached. This is that quote. It's actually sitting in SharePoint. So if I were to go here and let's see if I can, well, here, I'll go back and I want to open the location. So you can actually see the structure. So I'm actually following that document management. There's no need to create the document locations. It's creating it automatically throughout the service, which is actually one use case of Attachment Extractor standalone is, you don't want to have to manually create document locations. But yeah, if I open this quote here, you'll see I'm using account-based document management. So it's going account, account name, quote, and then the quotes under those. And then of course, if I went to my file here, it should, yeah, there it is. 40 minutes ago, it's been extracted to that specific location. On the email body side, you are limited to Azure Blob, but that's really for good reason. I won't show that because all you'll see is a GUID, and if I open one, it's just XML, and that's primarily, that's kind of why you wouldn't want it in SharePoint. SharePoint is really a document management solution as well as a storage location, but Blob is really, or Blob containers are flat storage. So what we're moving there is essentially, XML with rich HTML in it. So you wouldn't want that in SharePoint. The other side of that is also speed. So the speed at which it retrieves it, the speed at which it moves that, because to really get the most out of Attachment Extractor, you're more so dealing with volume. But yeah, so to show a little bit, that's kind of what the UI looks like. It is kind of funny to show because there should be no change. Like if I turned off the setting that said add markup, you'd think that I was just, kind of blowing some smoke and showing just a standard environment. But if I go over here to show a little bit of the configuration, so I'll just go here and I will open on my other tab here. Oops. So these are our services. The nice part here is, number one, from a security perspective, I probably already mentioned that we're ISO certified, which, reason it's not SOC 2 is just because we're an EU-based company. ISO 27001 is more common in the EU. Of course, we are happy to fill out a security assessment, but the good news there is you can also self-host. So you can host through us or self-host. You can have it fully set up in your own tenant, via VM, or host it locally in a local server. However, hosting is included in the cost, and the majority of companies who use Attachment Extractor do host through us. Now, my demo environment, you can see we do have several hosting regions as well. This is all hosted in Azure, including, the US, Canada, all over the EU, Australia. My demo environment is actually based out of Germany. So you can see the service it's set up is automatically choosing either the same data center or the closest to it. So, but to show a little bit of how it's set up, it truly is a set up and forget service. In fact, I'm excited for the newest case study to come out, because they said, essentially they were set up and nearly ready to go in 30 minutes, which is not an exaggeration. This service is a relatively new demo environment, so it's not moving too much data yet. But you can see we do give an overview, but to get in the configuration and to walk through how easy it is to set up, it's really two connections that you're making. It's one to the Dataverse or Dynamics instance, and then one to the storage location. That's all you need. You can see here, I'm using an application user for connection. I won't go too much into that, but just to show, you can really support this from an enterprise perspective, not having to use, using basically a service principal user versus a standard user and having to consume a license. But to walk through some of the setup here, of course, what am I extracting? In this case, attachments, which is attachments and notes. Where am I moving them to? In this case, it's SharePoint. What type of integration am I using? Integrated SharePoint, which is following document management. Next gets into the subfolders, but what I like to skip to really quick is actually the filter criteria. So, well, I guess I should say the most important setting first is this extract, which extracts data, but you also have the option to copy. So some of our clients are just using this as a copy tool to copy specifically, all files from their Dynamics instance, but primarily it's used as a data reduction tool. But to walk through the first filters here, and this is on the file side. So you have a size filter. So that's based off of, you might want to, if you're extracting to SharePoint, you might want to keep this above 10 kilobytes. If you're extracting to Azure Blob, you can lower all the way down. The only reason you might want to limit that is, well, number one, if you're doing like a phased approach, but number two is if you don't want to move those little, like little tiny LinkedIn images from like everyone's signature, which is unfortunately that will blow up your storage if you're sending a ton of emails with a very heavy signature. But you can extract those. It's really what your preference is. The next is a dynamic age filter, and this is based on the modified date of the record. So in the case of what I was showing in email, so it's based off the modified date. And this is an older than. So you can set this for hours, weeks, days, years. And it just allows you to control like every day, since it's dynamic, new items will meet that criteria. Next, these are more admin settings. But next gets into a blacklist or whitelist filter. And that blacklist and whitelist is based off parent tables. So an example of this would be if I hit configure whitelist, I believe I only have a few tables defined here. So yeah, only items that have a parent of account, case, contact, opportunity, and quote will be extracted. But I could also reverse that to be a blacklist and just say, okay, extract everything but, and then I could put in something like cases. So case emails will always, and case attachments and notes will always be retained in Dataverse. Finally, the last setting I'll mention here is going to be the static time range filter. So this is opposite to the dynamic range where you're just saying, hey, if this is if I just want to move historical data, or if I just want to initially move historical data. So you just would say, I want to extract from, January 1st, 2020. Probably not the best date for everyone. I think that was near the beginning of the first lockdowns, but from there all the way to say January 1st, 2024. So that way, new items aren't meeting that criteria of being extracted. But there's a few other cool things in this service from a management perspective. So number one, I already showed the kind of overview. So this shows you very high level what's being moved. The next is a granular view of actually the data. So it's working, what it's doing the whole time. We try to be as transparent as possible with all of our features or with all of our products. And you can see you can tell this is a demo environment because it's only moved, there are probably only 126 completed emails in this environment, but you can see actually day to day, like these are the two items I added today. So you can see 625, this is moving to SharePoint. It's even telling me where it's moving it to. The nice part about this is unlike the capacity overview out of the box in in the Microsoft, what is it, in the admin setting, Power Apps Admin Center, where you have the capacity, it's updating, minute by minute versus every 24 hours. So the day you start this and it starts moving data, of course, you're not going to see a change in your capacity because it's not being updated by Microsoft in the background. Whereas on our side, in near real time, you'll see, items are being moved. The other cool thing, which I haven't mentioned yet, and I'll get more into the trial here in a little bit, but is you can also, so not having that add markup, you might say, how do I know if something's been extracted or not without running something like a SQL query, which is, beyond what you should have to do to see if something's extracted. You can go into your settings, choose a record and run analysis, and it'll tell you if it's been extracted, if not, why, or if it'll be extracted in the future. The other side of that is when you trial it, which the full product, it's the full version is trialable, is a single item. So you can choose a single record, and you do that by just copying out the URL and then just saying add single item extract. And this is one I ran this morning just to double check. So it moved the file just because I kind of wanted to force it to extract a brand new item. And then it's telling me that the email itself has already been extracted. So very helpful from a trial, from an initial like testing standpoint, if you want to make sure the behavior is how I've talked about it or how you have your SharePoint or Azure Blob set up. But the next is email content. So as mentioned, I have two services here, and I know I'm running low on time, so I'm going to move a little quicker. And it's very similar. The only real difference here, well, there's two major differences. Number one, what I'm extracting, which in this case is email content, and where it's sending it to. So instead of having a connection to Dataverse and a connection to SharePoint, I have a connection to Dataverse and a connection to a blob container. And you're just using an SAS URI, so similar to like application or an app user where you set the validity, the length of time it's valid for, so you don't have to worry about sign-on frequency or conditional access policies. It just makes it very easy to set up. The only real difference between these services in terms of configuration is there's no size filter, and that's primarily because emails are small. So you're generally dealing with, kilobytes of data. So why would you wouldn't want to limit what you're extracting. You want to move as much as you possibly can in terms of email size. A cool thing on the configuration of the service though in the background, and really once you set these, I say it probably too much, but once you set these, you generally don't mess with them again. The next time you'd have to open up your service, other than just to check to see if it's moving things, is to if you set that SAS URI for 2 years of being valid, set a reminder in 2 years, update that string. But overall, you should be able to just kind of forget about it, and users shouldn't even know that it's necessarily running in the background from a usage perspective. Now I am running out of time, or running low on time, I should say, on the showing side. So let me go into back to my slideshow here, and what I do want to talk about a little bit is also our pricing. So we do offer a trial. So it is a trial that's based on usage, and it's limited to moving 5,000 items, and it's 100 items per day. It's very easy to set up. It's also very easy to remove from your environment. So what you can do is you can revert anything that you've moved back, and you can do that in a production service as well. You can switch the service to revert if you need to. The other side of that is we can also do a calculation, which is available on our website. So you can say, hey, these are my table sizes and how much would I save? What would be my estimated return on investment? And as mentioned, our average is approximately 200%. So it's a pretty quick win-win. And we can also do a deeper dive and actually have a call, take a look at your tables, and get back with you to a more detailed summary of the cost savings and reductions. So that's something we offer. But I do believe I am out of time So I'll just leave this with the trial kind of information here. But yeah, thank you everyone for your time. And I think we're gonna move on to some questions.
Thank you, Bailey. That's great. Looks like we had a question come in here. How long does it typically take AttachmentExtractor to move those files and attachments?
Yeah, so that's a bit of a variable. What you can expect on the file side is about 2 gigabytes per day. You can also set up things like load balancing, but generally that's our average. So you do have to take that into account with how much data you have, how quickly you need to have it moved out. But yeah, our average on the files and attachment side is about 2 gigabytes per day.
We have another question here. Is AttachmentExtractor licensed per user, per environment, or per storage volume?
Ooh, that's a good question. So it's licensed essentially per site, and what we're counting is all, and that's really a tiered user count license. So what we're saying is if you have 10 users, it's an extra small. If you, in fact, I can show our license if I'm still sharing my screen here. I can show our pricing tiers here. But essentially it's counting the number of users that are enabled in that environment. And by enabled, we're saying they have the ability to actually update records in Dataverse. The nice part about that is within the service, we also show you your count of users that we're seeing. So you can directly see what your license cost would be as soon as you install a trial. It'll actually tell you. But yeah, it's a per production environment license, and then the license is based on the total number of enabled users.
Awesome. And another question here. What's the impact on performance when handling large volumes of attachments?
Oh, there's no impact, or there shouldn't be any impact. Of course, if you're running a ton of external API calls through other services, it's something you'd want to investigate to make sure you're nowhere near your throughput limitations. But you should see no performance degradation when moving attachment extractor because it is set running batches. Really, and this gets kind of outside of my technical pay grade, but you should see no impact on performance.
Well, it looks like we have one last question here. Can permissions be customized for who can access extracted files?
So yes, so we don't control permissions. It's our kind of rule of thumb is don't reinvent the wheel or reinvent functionality that's already there. So we just listen to the Dataverse permissions. So if they didn't previously have access, they won't have access to extracted items in the future. Because the record still exists, you're still managing it at a permissions level within or a privilege level within Dataverse or Dynamics.
Awesome. Well, if that's all the questions that we have for today, thank you for attending our webinar. I'd also like to thank Bailey again for presenting for us today. Once again, you can find our social media, our website, and a Calendly to schedule a 30-minute meeting with one of our experts at Sabre in the chat. Thank
All
you for
right.
attending. Everybody have a great day.
Thanks, Caitlin. Thanks, y'all. Bye.